Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts overall has a very mixed review. Critics really like the game and find it decent at best, and fans don't really like the game as much as the Bear and Bird's initial adventures. To give a brief history, Banjo-Kazooie is pretty much Rareware's flagship series on the Nintendo 64. It's what they're known for, other than like Perfect Dark and Conker's Bad Fur Day and GoldenEye 007 and Donkey Kong 64. Banjo-Kazooie is a collectathon platformer loved by its fans. Banjo-Tooie did the same thing, but worse, some would say. Not really living up to the first game, with all the backtracking you had to do, and all of the puzzles being a bit more complex and cryptic. By the time Nuts and Bolts rolled around though, everyone started disliking that game a whole lot more. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is a great game, but the way it was presented with the initial trailer up until the final release, it's not that great of a Banjo-Kazooie game in the traditional sense. So the year is 2008, a really cool year, where nothing bad happened. Fans were excited for a brand new Banjo-Kazooie game that they were waiting almost 10 years for. It was released on all the current gen consoles, which had the best graphics at the time, so they couldn't wait to see Banjo-Kazooie in HD. They boot up the game, and what the fuck is this? I actually have a pretty funny story related to Nuts and Bolts. So, one Christmas, I want to say like 2014 or so, my sister got me a copy of the game because I was in my Banjo phase and I had just completed the Xbox Live Arcade port of Banjo-Kazooie, and I was also very obsessed with the JonTron review of Nuts and Bolts. The catch was that I had received the game completely wrapped in duct tape. I eventually unwrap all the duct tape and realize, oh, it's Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Man, JonTron hates this game. That means I gotta hate this game. So I pop it in my brother's old Xbox 360, watch the Sonic video for more lore on that, and would you look at that, it's fucking Banjo. After playing it for a little bit, I stopped caring that it had cars or that it was different, and it was Banjo-Kazooie, and that's all that kind of mattered to me. In Nuts and Bolts, it's been 8 years since the events of Banjo-Tooie took place, and both Banjo and Kazooie have been real slackers with no Gruntilda around to deal with, considering they fucking decapitated her in the last game. Surprise, surprise though, Gruntilda comes back with a disembodied head and the two get into a scrap. The fuck? Is what I would say if the Lord of Games or Log didn't show up. This guy comes around here, he fucking pauses your game with flashing Comic Sans, and he's just like, so annoying. He constantly belittles Banjo and the player for no discernible reason other than to fuel his own ego. And I think he takes his title of Lord a bit too seriously. Log eventually performs liposuction on Banjo and gives Gruntilda a new body as well, but not like a hot one or anything, it's just a fucking robot. He then transports all three of them through a portal with brand new vehicles to help them on their new quest, and for some unexplained reason they just go along with it, because I think he's holding Spiral Mountain for ransom or something. It's insane. When you get to Showdown Town, you run into Mumbo and the other characters from the Banjo cinematic universe, who went through the same experience as our three main characters here. Mumbo now owns Mumbo's Motors, the shop where you can modify your cars in-game to your liking. Like the original Banjo-Kazooie, levels are locked behind a jiggy paywall. You must get a certain amount of these shiny MacGuffins to continue on to the next world. First of which being Nutty Acres. Now, imagine the first world of every game ever, you know, the green grass and the blue sky. Now just make it metallic and plastic.
Oh my. Impossible! He's lying!
Everything about the land itself, including its inhabitants, are non-organic from the looks of it. It's almost lifelike, which is somewhat uncanny given that the original landscape of Banjo lives in this all-organic kind of world. Well, as organic as giant floating cabbages with eyes can be. After getting your first Jiggy, you drop into Nutty Acres and the land is completely barren. The level design is treated like a classic Banjo game, but with different mechanics, so it just doesn't mesh well. This video is going to be trying to praise Banjo-Kazooie, but this is its major flaw. Don't quote me on this, but I believe Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was supposed to be Banjo-Threeie. I mean, look at the level design and look at how open it is.
We were going to make a remake of Banjo-Kazooie, so the previous game, but we were actually going to change things about the game as you played. We were really concerned that trying to get the message of this is not just a reskin or it's the old game with new graphics. We felt it might be a hard sell and players would expect a brand new game.
Eventually they got rid of the Banjo-Threeie idea and just decided to add cars, which honestly doesn't make a whole lot of sense looking back at it. Sure, they wanted to try something different, but was this the way to go? After walking back to your spawn point, you walk up to Klungo. Yeah, remember him? You talk to Klungo, and he gives you a mission to collect Jiggies. This is something that carries over from the original games where you collect Jiggies to progress in the worlds, but the way you get them are completely different. And the Jinjos are also here too. Whenever you complete their challenges, they'll give you a Jiggy as a reward, and then they just fuck off. Back on the topic of the land being extremely barren, I will say at least it's nice to look at. Everything is stylized in a way where it all matches and meshes well together. And I really do like the blocky designs of all the characters. I do think this is because of the grid style used to build cars. That, or they were trying to replicate the N64's blocky graphics, so it could be seen as either a positive or a negative depending on who you ask. I do like this art style over the original Banjo-Kazooie art style, and I'm also just really glad that it didn't look like Super Mario in real life. You know, come to think of it, most of this game shares this similarity in level design. Just big, open areas with nothing to do besides talk to the NPCs to start missions, and it's the main reason why a lot of people don't actually enjoy this game at all. It changed how a Banjo game should work and just turned it into something completely different. That different style of game being yeah, I can't really talk about nuts and bolts without mentioning Tears of the Kingdom in the year 2024. So a lot of people on the internet have already mentioned that Nuts and Bolts and Tears of the Kingdom look very similar. People love Tears of the Kingdom since it's a sequel to Breath of the Wild, one of the best-selling Zelda games ever. But Tears of the Kingdom isn't a traditional Zelda, and neither was Breath of the Wild. Zelda went from a top-down RPG to a 3D action-adventure series to now an open-world 3D action-adventure series. Banjo went from a 3D collectathon to a top-down to a collectathon with fucking cars. The moment Link got into a car, everyone lost their collective shit. The moment Banjo got into a car, everyone lost their collective shit. I basically said the same thing with just swapping one word, and it has a completely different meaning. I'm not saying Tears of the Kingdom is a bad game by any means, but the public opinion has swayed to where innovation is good now. Like, changing the formula is good because people are getting fatigued over the same basic cookie-cutter format. I could also say this about Sonic the Hedgehog. That's a whole different video because Sonic fans hate their games.
Hi, sorry to break your immersion. I didn't have an outro recorded at this point for the video since the original recording is almost like a year old, so I'm making one now to wrap up the video. Like I said, Nuts and Bolts wasn't what fans expected to come out of this franchise, and because of that, people absolutely hated this game. But really, if you think about it, Nuts and Bolts is a really different and interesting game on its own. Does it have flaws? Yeah, but what game do you know about that doesn't have flaws?
Hey man, what about me?
You get the fuck back! This is not your video! I will defend this game until the end of time, and it seems to be a running theme that I like games that most people find bad or awkward to control or just frustrating to play. So maybe next time I make a video like this, I'll cover one of those games. But for now, that's all. I'll see you next time.
I wanna fly sky high. Let's go.